I'm Hazel. It is no longer Saturday today. That one came and went. My excuse is that there wasn't all that much news to talk about last Friday, but there is sure news now, and there will probably be more by this upcoming Friday, so let's just jump into it. Blizzard made a number of announcements this week concerning Shadowlands, the first of which being that the closed Shadowlands Alpha starts this week. As far as I can tell, nobody has been invited just yet, or if they are, they're being awfully calm about it. But invites should go out this week, so people should be in any day now. When it opens, they are including the new level 1 through 10 experience for the Alliance, as well as the entire leveling zone of Bastion. All of the major class changes and unpruning should be in place. There's also talk about a new quest AI that is 3D, should theoretically help unpeel you from your minimap and identify where you are going and whether or not it's above or below you. I definitely think this is one I'm going to need to see to understand, but it sounds good on paper. The shining star of this blog post, if you ask me, is that Conquest and PvP vendors are coming back in Shadowlands. We'll have to find them somehow. I'm so happy about that. I can't quite express it to you. They said that later on in April, they are aiming to get the Torghast Tower of the Damned experience up, as well as the Zone of Revendreth, so stuff to look forward to before they've even given us the first batch of stuff, and it's just all very, very, very exciting. I am hoping to get into the alpha fairly early and then make content for it. That's the dream. Obviously, nothing's ever guaranteed, but fingers crossed. The second announcement they made was a more in-depth look at Covenant abilities. So if you missed it or just forgot since BlizzCon, which was like lifetimes ago at this point, you will join one of 4 Covenants, and each Covenant will give you a main ability that everybody in that Covenant has, regardless of what class they play, and then a second one that is specific to your class in that Covenant. So they released a big table, essentially, with almost all of those class-specific Covenant abilities in them. I will link to it in case you want to look through them. Your main Covenant ability is more about like movement and utility, whereas your class-specific one should be about doing damage. And something that kind of jumped out at me from just skimming over these is that almost all of them, not all, but almost all of them reference damage specifically, as opposed to giving you haste or interacting with a class mechanic. So my understanding, my hope, I guess, with that is that by having them do damage, the number damage, as opposed to saying, you know, buffs and debuffs and interactions, it should make them easier to balance. Because the big concern when you talk about class-specific Covenant abilities is, how are you going to balance these? And if they're unbalanced, does that mean I have to take the Covenant I don't like just to be able to do my best in raid? So my dream is that they balance them closely enough that you can pick the Covenant you want cosmetically, and it's going to be a very minimal difference, kind of like how racials work now. I'd like to think that phrasing them all like this in a way that gives them one tuning knob they can adjust, as opposed to having to account for other interactions and itemization and all that stuff. My hope is that that will help them get them close. I don't ever anticipate everything will be perfectly balanced, because that doesn't sound like how the world works, but, you know, close enough that I don't feel bad for taking the Covenant that has the look that I want. The third announcement that came out just today was a more in-depth look at the class changes from a Blizzard-specific blog post. So before I talk about the specific changes, I think it's really great how they are releasing all of this information about the Covenants, about the abilities, about the class changes firsthand from them. Because usually the way that it works is that they'll throw up an alpha build, and then all of the fan sites and all of the content creators will all dive in at once, and they will all dig through it, and they will all try to come up with their own list of changes. And then in order for your average person to figure out what on earth is changing, you have to kind of like dig and pick and choose, and people might have different information, because when you have that many people extracting data from a build, there's a higher chance of human error. Whereas this way, hopefully it mostly got proofread. It's a lot of information, so I would expect a couple of errors, but because it comes from them, everybody can get it firsthand, as opposed to everybody digging through various builds that came out at various times. I think this is way better. Also, if you haven't read it, you should read the post directly, because the language that was used to write these is hilariously, like, descriptive and flowery, and some of these sentences are just too much for me. Anyways, my favorite takeaways from the class changes. Druids got the unpruning of the century. I miss playing my Resto Druid. I want it back, and the PvP vendors thing is encouraging. And then we're getting back baseline Ferocious Bite, Cyclone, Stampeding Roar, Iron Fur, Nature's Swiftness, and then with an affinity talent, if I go Boomkin Affinity, I get Typhoon. If I go Guardian Affinity, I get In-Cap Roar. It's just madness. It's everything. It's so many buttons. I can't wait. A few more things that jumped out. Maelstrom as a shaman resource is just gone. Enhancement in elemental shamans will be more cooldown based and combo based now. And then monks, actually Windwalker and Brewmaster monks will now get to choose whether or not they want to use two-handers or one-handers. Both Windwalker and Brewmaster get that choice, so that's kind of fun. They mentioned that hunter stables are getting a big increase, so you'll have much more room to keep all of your pets, and there's going to be new cool tameable pets coming down. And then Shadow Priest, my first love. Shadow Priest. We're getting baseline Shadow Word Death. We are getting baseline Power Infusion back. And then they have reworked Surrender to Madness, and I'm so excited. So they made it sound baseline, and I am praying that it is, and that this isn't going to be a talent anymore. Essentially, very similar to the old Surrender to Madness. It's an instant cast. You go into Void form, you Void Erupt. You are casting while moving. You get all of that extra insanity, all that good stuff. Except this time, instead of dying when you leave Void form, you get to live if you kill the boss before you leave Void form. But if you leave Void form before whatever you're fighting dies, then you die. In a raid fight, that means that Surrender to Madness sounds so fun in a raid fight, and being able to take it without having to sacrifice anything else, and being able to just just timing it perfectly, or trying to time it perfectly, so that you get that perfect amount of juicy casting while moving extra damage goodness before the boss dies. It just sounds great. I can't wait. I did read through each and every one of these class changes in my stream this morning, and I'm going to edit up that clip and then put it on YouTube probably tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that if you want more reactions. Like, if you want the data, just go look at the blog post. But if you care at all what I think, I don't know why you would, but if you do, that video will be up tomorrow. Of course, all of this is still under development, so things can change. I saw in a tweet or something somewhere, I don't remember where I saw it, but somebody said something about let us know if you think we unpruned too far. And I was just thinking about how funny it would be if they announced something was getting unpruned, and then in development they were like, you know what? No, we really didn't need that. I don't think they're gonna do that, but it would be exquisitely funny. My overall thoughts on them: I think these changes look great on paper. I will caution that, as far as I can remember, almost every expansion looked great on paper. Warlords looked great on paper. You know, everything looks great before you get into it, largely. So with a grain of salt, but I'm really excited about a whole bunch of this. I don't mind ability bloat. I don't mind having a ton of different buttons to choose from, so I'm excited about the unpruning. The way that I look at it is that it's fine as long as most of the extra abilities are not rotational. Like, if I have to interweave 24 buttons multiple times every single fight to do optimal damage, that's a problem. But if I have, like, my usual, 6 to 10 buttons that you use for damage, and then you have like this library of cool situational other stuff, that makes way more sense to me. Like, I don't think just because you don't use every spice in your spice rack every day means that you need to throw the whole thing out, It's just because you don't love the coriander and everything doesn't mean you just chuck the coriander in the garbage. You keep it on the spice rack. You don't put it on your bedside table. You don't put it in your pocket. You don't walk around with it all the time. But, when you make that one dish and it calls for coriander and you're like, man, I'm glad I kept that. And it feels good to use that particular spice. In this analogy, the spice rack is like shift mod keybinds, and the pocket/bedside table is like your main comfy rotational keybinds, and I really lost the thread of that one, so let's move on. Questions from this week. Twin Rex asks, as a Shadow Priest, are you excited about the Shadowlands, and which covenant are you most looking forward to? I am very excited. For my Shadow Priest, her covenant is going to be Venthyr if I have any say in the matter. I suppose if they turned out to be wildly unbalanced, then I would pick whatever's best. But I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of damage if it means I can get that like dramatic gothic vibe. So definitely Venthyr if I have any say in it. Belia asks, question, Hazel, what time of the day do you feel that you are most productive? Do you like to get things done early in the morning or later in the afternoon? Love the kitty purrs. So lately, never. Outside of that, though, generally speaking, I am most productive early morning, and by that I mean like early morning is the only time I can really rely on myself to get something done. If I have like a new habit that I'm trying to establish, I have the best chance if I stick it like before 8 a.m. And then like kind of like 9 to noon is sort of like a medium level of productivity depending on the day, and then it's just all downhill from there. And Margot asks, I've decided to return to the game after a 3-month break and I already feel kind of overwhelmed. Do you have any tips on how to get back into it at this point in the game? So for a 3-month break, you were looking at getting your cloak caught up, which means unlocking your cloak, it means doing Oldham and Vale dailies, it means doing your assaults, and then it means doing your horrific visions. If I were you, I would try to get your cloak up to rank 12. You're going to get a pretty good stat proc once you hit rank 12, and then you really have your choice of goals depending on what's important to you. You can try to get into raiding, you can try to push Mythic Plus. If you're more of a solo content person, you can try to work on your solo Horrific Vision, try to get full clears in, try to get masked full clears in. There are some great mount farms to do in the new content, including the Shadow Barb drone quest line in Uldum and the Ivory Cloud Serpent thing in Vale, so lots to do just depending on what you're into. If it is a fresh 120 that you were considering, then you want to start by opening Nazjatar and then unlocking your Azurite essences and then going and getting your cloak set up. In that order specifically. I don't think they even let you get your cloak until you've done those first two things. So Nazjatar, essences, cloak. And that has been my week. Thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions you would like me to answer in the next one, leave them as comments in the most recent vlog, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.